Hey, welcome back to 9394, a music podcast. So happy you're here. So happy that my buddy Derek Fern came back on the show. Always a pleasure to spend some time with that dude. He's a dear friend and an old friend, and a dude from my punk rock days in as much as I had those. And he is here to talk about an album that is super important to him and I. One of the greatest punk albums, one of the greatest albums of all time. Hoss by the band Lagwagon.
And now you're searching for that new Messiah. It's your brief passion to set 'em up and knock 'em down. Put 'em on a pedestal like solitary. When that ring you marry, it's all yours to guarantee. Cause you hold a hierarchy of senses. They are drawn like magnets to a genius, it's confirmed. Set 'em up and knock 'em down. Take it so accountable. But this is no great loss. Cherry never was a choice. He's laid on the cross. Gives you credit and a voice. It'll remain your beautiful like the old like carry on through them.
Hello.
Well, good morning, Travis.
And a good day to you, sir.
What's going on?
Nothing, man. Nice Lagwagon hoodie.
Yeah, I figured I'd get festive with what we're talking about today. I actually got my Survival of the Fattest tee on, too.
Wow, look at you. Just a Fat Records fool.
Yep, still dressed like I'm 16 at 43. Yep.
That's how we do it. The most I get to be an adult is like, I guess I'll button up the flannel over the band shirt.
Ooh, nice, yeah.
That's how I class it up.
I love it. Very similar here, yeah.
This is no great loss. Another one will come. The wait is short, the searching brief. You find another fate, another Clark Kent, another Superman. Lucky in the band.
Thank you for coming back to the show. This is your third visit, so you've chosen an album outside of the regular 93, 94 timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Which album did you pick?
I chose Hoss by Lagwagon, their third full length.
Yes, from 1995.
1995. I think it was released in like November.
Yeah, I don't think it was even like recorded in 94 like some of the other ones. I've kind of like buzzed my way into being like, yeah, it's connected. It's close enough.
Hey,
it's fine.
They started writing it, I'm sure, in 94.
They existed in 94.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a stretch, but that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's such a huge album for you and me personally and our friends group. It is a big deal for us. How did you get into this album?
Actually, from all of that, from being in a band with you and Brandon and Morgan and Steve. And yeah, I mean, I think we even named our one and only recorded punk rock album after a lyric from Violins, right?
Yep.
That's very life. Well, it's funny because you guys were into Lagwagon before I was. It took me a little while, I guess, to come around. I'm not really sure why. I can't really remember why, but I remember I came to Trash first.
Yeah.
I think I liked the rawness of it and, just the super fast punk rock, like Stoking the Neighbors that you and Liz talked about. I mean, it's just like an unhinged punk rock song. So that kind of like drew me in. And I think Hoss had like that different sound. So it took me a little longer to get into Hoss, but eventually I was like, I like that song. What is it? Sleep that's on that?
Survival of the Fattest,
yeah, so I'm like, all right, it's time to get in. So it took me a little longer to get into it, but I think I was actually even probably covering a song by person before I did the album. But then, eventually I came around to love Lagwagon as much as you guys did in the band.
In an unfamiliar place, 'cause you put me out, the butterfly sick joke into this half-straight life as you come and go. 'Cause I forgot to service you, and we broke down, and you can't live with my mistakes. But I assume false grace, open my arms, and grasp at something true. How are ya? How have you been? Girl, I miss you. Wanna see you again. Oh, are ya? Wanna be there when you could be here. Your love slipping away.
So I was hanging out with my cousin a lot. My cousin was 2 years younger than me. So I had just started driving, you know, like late 96, early 97. So again, I was a little late to come into this album with it coming out in 95. But I remember that I had a gift certificate to, I can't even remember what music store it was at, like the Flint Mall or 12 Oaks, you know, I can't remember.
A Sam Goodies, perhaps.
Right.
Something along those lines.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
something like that. So I'm like, you know what? It's time to go get some CDs when I was hanging out with my cousin and a couple of his buddies in Fenton. And we drove my aunt's vehicle up there. Remember Chevy Luminas? Remember those things?
I do, yeah.
Looked like there was like no front end. It was like the scariest thing to drive. So yeah, we drove that to Flint and I picked up Hoss and Face to Face self-titled.
Nice.
And we were listening to them on the way back and they were into stuff like Falling Sickness and, you know, that kind of punk ska stuff that I thought was okay. It just didn't grab me. So this is totally different than that, even though it's still, you know, in the punk genre. Right. And I just remember them being like, "You like this?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is actually really good." You know, quality songwriting and stuff like that. It took them probably a year or two after that to come around to it. But yeah, I always kind of felt like I was like the big brother to them. It was just funny. I remember that specifically. Like, you actually like this?
Shepherding them to the land of punk.
Yeah. I'm like, come on in, guys. The water's warm.
That's funny. Yeah, as I mentioned on the show I did with Luke, I got into Lagwagon with, I guess, Duh and Trash because of my older brother. But Hoss was the first album that felt like mine of theirs.
Yeah.
It was not one I had any trouble getting into because, if anything, like, I kind of struggled to get into, not struggle, but like there was some punk that I liked as a teen. And then like all my friends started getting into punk. And then like with the band that we're in turned into a punk band and that kind of stuff. So it was like, okay, this is what we're doing. But I never had any qualms with this album whatsoever because it's so emotional. You know, we turned into big emo kids within a couple years after this came out, you know?
Absolutely.
So this like prepped me for that in some ways, I think, because it's a highly melodic album. It's so funny because I'm going to do an episode for Rancid's first album soon. And so I've been listening to that and I'm like, it's so funny because I've been listening to these two albums, Rancid's first album and Hoss, and they couldn't be more different, even though they're in the same genre, you know, like Rancid's like punk with leather and spikes and like patches and stuff. And then Lagwagon's like punk with like cargo shorts and Vans and patches, you know? So
and like it's okay to watch sports and listen to Lagwagon.
Not that I ever did, but yes.
But I don't know. I always remember like Brandon, you know, from, you know, those times, like being so into sports and so punk. And I'm like, isn't that weird? And I don't know. I think we even had like a conversation once. He's like, "No, don't you listen to Pulley?" I'm like, "Yeah, I love Pulley." And he's like, "You know, he's a pitcher in like the MLB." And I'm like, "Really? No, I did not know that." Yeah, but I don't know. Just that's what I think of in my mind. Because I mean, Rancid and sports don't seem to mix because you can't really put on a hat or, you know, a baseball helmet with your Liberty spikes on your head.
This is true. You swash them down. Yeah. So, I mean, so this album for me became the go-to. So in the band that we were in, you and I, with Brandon and Morgan and Steve Guile, we listened to this a ton as we formed. So it was like heavily influencing what we were doing, which was, I think, partly why we named our album in reference to them. It was kind of like we were consciously emulating them in some ways.
Yeah.
And for my money, like, this is the best punk album of the genre. This is as good as it gets for me. There's not a single album that I would put above this in that genre. It has always been like, if I feel like listening to punk, this is what I'm putting on probably.
Wow, that's awesome. So not even like Punk and Drublic or something like that.
I respect the hell out of Punk and Drublic, and I would put that up there, you know, on the, if I was making my Mount Rushmore of punk albums, that would be on there. But the first face I'd carve would be Hoss.
No way. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was a huge album for me too, and it still is. And listening to it so much over the last like couple of weeks, I don't know. Listening to it in like, you know, my little Bose earbuds, you know, instead of back in 96, 97 with my shitty red truck, you know, my S15 that was more rust, I think, colored on the outside than red. But it only had those two speakers in the front, you know, and the bass response on them was absolutely garbage. So everything sounded garbage. So listening to it a lot in the last 2 weeks, I'm like, holy shit, I've never heard this before.
Right.
Like these little nuances.
Yeah, the first 30 seconds is all bass. I always thought it took
a
while to start.
Exactly. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like I couldn't hear it in my truck. You know, I turned it all the way up and I'm like, I think there's something happening here. And then like Joey Cape would start screaming in my face. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah. much better than listening recently.
And it's aged really well.
So well. I mean, the songwriting's so great. I mean, I think with this album in particular, Joey's songwriting really came to where, I mean, it's just like the foundation that he built off of, I think, moving forward. It's when he really hit his stride in songwriting. You can really tell, I think, on this album in particular, that a lot of the songs were written acoustically, which I've heard in interviews. That's kind of how he tends to write. Even like the fastest punk rock songs start on an acoustic. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. I mean, like songs like Sleep, or there's one that ends with an acoustic and like the last like half a bar.
Right. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, probably got it written down.
Yeah, this is one of those albums that, despite the fact that I've listened to it regularly for fucking 30 years now, just about, it's one of those albums that getting ready for this episode, I had like, what song is which? This one's, okay, this is Weak. Okay, then that one's Sick, and that one's Sleep. No, I always thought it was the other way around. You know, that kind of shit, which those two songs should not be side by side.
Right, yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those albums I would just always throw in the CD player while I was driving, or something like that. I never like would look necessarily. I was always bad about that with some of my favorite albums, because I would just embrace them as an album and not really get hung up on the individual songs. I'd call them by the track number, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Same. Yeah. Well, they have all those songs in a row. They're Sleep, Sick, Rifle, Weak, you know, all single title tracks, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, it gets a little blurry, but I didn't mind nailing down specific. Like, now I know for sure which each one is, but all the same, I can't think of. I think it's Black Eyes ends with the acoustic, right?
That's right. Yes, you're right. Absolutely correct.
All right.
Yep.
Wow.
I actually have it written down there. There it is. Yep.
Okay. Confirmation. I feel validated.
Nailed it.
So what's your favorite song on the album, my friend?
Oh, here it is.
So hard to choose, right?
Well, yes. And it's funny because, you know, this is my third time doing the show, so I knew this was going to come up and it was going to be asked. And in my head, before really diving in and like making notes, or, you know, sitting down in a dark corner in my house and listening to this on repeat, I would have said Weak. I just always loved that opening riff. I mean, it just like comes straight in, just kicks you in the teeth. And I changed it. Listening to this more and more and more, Rifle is my favorite track.
It's a hard hitter.
Dude, it's so good. Like, it comes in, it just kicks your ass, and it like never lets up. I love the spaciness of, you know, the riffs going through like the verses and stuff. I love how it builds. You know, it starts with the drums and then the bass, and then, I mean, I think it's almost like a full minute before Joey even starts singing. But then it's from there till the end, it's just kick you in the teeth. And when he comes in with that rifle, rifle, rifle me.
Yeah. You want to throw some bows in the pit when that starts up.
It just like opens up right there, you know, because like it has that like spacey kind of syncopated guitar going on, and then all of a sudden it's just like straight ripping chords and a straight kick your ass kind of punk rock beat.
Rifle, rifle, rifle me. Rifle, rifle, rifle me. Rifle, rifle, rifle me. Playing on their sympathy.
Just every time it almost gives me goosebumps. Just, it's so killer.
It is. And you were talking about how this is kind of like the apex of Joey Cape's songwriting.
Yeah.
But it's also the last album with Derek Fern on drums and
Right.
what's the bass player's name? Jesse Buglioni?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It was the last go with them two, and Rifle is a good example of that band needs those dudes. I mean, I like the stuff that came out after this album, but for me, this is pretty much where I stopped with them. I'll throw on double platinum every now and then, but this is the be-all, end-all for me for them, and it's partly because of that tightness between, I mean, what Buglioni's doing on the bass throughout Rifle is just, it should be so frenetic and like you can barely keep up with it, but instead it's like so precise and just like it drives the whole song, and Plord is just a master. He really was.
Yeah. Talking about Joey Cape coming alive on this album, I think Derek Plord really came into his own on this album too. Like, Trashed is amazing. His drumming is so killer, but if you really listen to it, he kind of almost feels like he's always just on the verge of, you know, coming off the tracks, you know?
Yeah, a little bit.
Like he's almost playing out of his shoes, like too fast. The beat gets a little wavy, you know, the beats per minute. But I feel like on this album in particular, I mean, he is incredibly tight.
Yeah.
The fills are phenomenal. The beats are fantastic. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with the production from Ryan Green. I mean, he was a drummer.
Yeah.
From my understanding, I listened to an interview on a podcast with him recently, and I mean, that was incredibly interesting because you think of this time of punk rock, you know, the Fat Wreck and the Epitaph time, I guess, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Ryan Green is synonymous with what Fat Records sounds like.
Oh, for sure.
And I finally got a reason why that is, and it's really interesting to me that basically he came into Mr. Brett with Bad Religion, and they hired him to do a quick like demo for some songs that were going to come out on their next album. He was impressed with Ryan Green, so he said, well, you know, I'll get you in touch with Fat Mike from this band called No Effects. And he had no idea what like punk rock. He had no idea what Bad Religion was. He had no idea what Fat Mike or, you know, No Effects was or stood for. And then, yeah, they talked on the phone and ended up making one of the greatest punk rock albums ever with Punk and Drublic.
Right.
And Fat Mike was so impressed with him that he basically wanted to use him for everything, because not only was he awesome at what he did, but he was super fast. And in those times, they didn't have a lot of money for Fat Records, and a lot of those albums were being recorded in a week or 10 days. I mean, that's insane if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. That's like not even on a major label or not on any label kind of behavior. That's the kind of shit you do when you're broke as fuck and doing it yourself.
Yeah. Well, and this album's 14 tracks.
Right. It's long.
Just the album. Because, I mean, there's songs that were left on the cutting room floor, like Layman's Terms and Wind in Your Sail, I think, came from these
was that from this session?
sessions. Yeah.
I wish you the worst, dear. To feel the greatest pain. Positive. You said it's all in vain. I know I felt, and I won't feel again. I know you. Hours of madness, years of dysfunction, the deepest in bitterness. No will to strive or achieve, finale and breakdown. Perpetual fall on your knees as you crawl back to me.
I can't believe Wind in Your Sail will be cut from this album. That's one of the best songs they ever did.
I mean, I might be wrong on that one, but I know Layman's Terms for sure came from this.
If it was Wind in Your Sail, there was a first recording of Wind in Your Sail, and there was a second recording of Wind in Your Sail. And that first recording of Wind in Your Sail was great, but it was a little rough. So maybe they just weren't happy with how that came out and then re-recorded it later. That would make sense. I remember like it being like a hard to find track for a while. It was a little bit rough until, you know, they re-recorded it. So I had a hard time picking my favorite song on this album. And I didn't want to be cliche, but if I'm honest with myself, it's still Razor Burn. I still fucking love Razor Burn.
She broke up with me 2 days later. I think she meant I wanted Italy. She has a new man, I have a new mustache. Now all my friends are gonna call me out.
It's a great song.
It's a great song. It's a fun and funny song, but it's an emotional song, and it's kind of, it's sad.
Yeah.
And the whole usage of the fucking "Come All You Faithful" at the end of it, I've always loved.
Yeah.
That little weird flourish that he puts in there.
Yeah.
It's just such a great song, and I think it's really exemplary of their style, and that they can be loose goofballs and just kind of like cheeky, and then at the same time can have like incredible emotional depth,
right,
and really touch on stuff that is universal. This is before I ever really grew facial hair. I was like struggling to have a goatee at that time, probably, but like I understood like the beard of shame. I understood like I'm so depressed, I've just like given up on personal hygiene and all that shit, and it's just like it's great. I love Razor Burn so much.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah, that's definitely one of the standouts for me too.
It's a crowd favorite. It really is. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, it's super catchy. But yeah, he kind of teeters that line between being goofy with his metaphors, but still hitting that, like you said, that emotional chord with you as you listen to it, and you kind of follow along with the lyrics, and you're like, yeah, I feel that.
Come all we faithful, joyful and triumphant. I am a new man, I have a beard of shame.
And I love a good reference, Sherilyn Fenn and like Billy Gibbons.
Yeah.
Had to be explained who Billy Gibbons was by our friend Morgan, I believe.
Yeah, he would know. That's good.
Yeah, it's a pretty great song. It may be one of the poppiest songs they wrote, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Well, and I think why I went with Rifle again is, I don't know, I tend to like his more melancholy songs, I guess, more outwardly melancholy songs, like the minor keys and, things like that. But I mean, the stuff they can do in a major scale is still absolutely phenomenal.
They're at the top of their game for this album. I feel like they could do no wrong, which is why I had a hell of a time trying to pick the least good song on this album. That was a struggle, man. I mean, up until, I don't know, an hour ago, I was still like, I'm not sure. I don't know that there is a weakest song on the album, to be honest.
I actually don't have anything written down.
You couldn't land on anything?
I don't have anything written down. I figured that we could talk about it, and I might be able to come up with something on the fly and say something. But yeah, it was a struggle for me too. So 16, 17-year-old Derek would say Ride the Snake.
Time to ride the snake. Oh, I've gone dead and blank. I don't wanna talk to a stranger. I want to single-minded hunt to build a bottom lake well. Can afford the labor of the feelings that you have. You tax. Talk to me, I can't hear you. Did you say the pain had gone away?
Because it's slow, and it's different, I guess, feel,
There's a reason why it's the last song on the album, yeah.
Well, and it's a great closer. So, I mean, you can't really fault it for being different when it's a closer, and typically you kind of want to end on a different note, possibly. But yeah, I mean, like the wah in there. Yeah, well, 43-year-old Derek says that song's actually pretty kick-ass, and just because it's slower, 16-year-old me doesn't make it less awesome.
It's my underrated. It's the one I chose for my underrated.
Okay,
yeah, because I was the same way growing up. Like, it was always like, well, the album's over by that point. I would turn it off sometimes even before that song, because I was like, I kind of felt like Shaving Your Head was like the epic send-off in a way. Because Shaving Your Head is a great song, but Ride the Snake, now as an adult, that is a song that I've underrated myself in my life, and it's a song that I think fans have underrated. So now it's maybe, I mean, I said Razor Burn because I wanted to like be true for like my whole life, in terms of favorite, but Ride the Snake is probably the song I think of most when I listen to this album, like the one that gets stuck in my head and the one I kind of dwell on and stuff,
When I see you at the church tomorrow, oh, the snake.
Well, I mean, even his vocal harmonies are just fantastic on that one. And they're well placed. I mean, they're just perfect. chef's kiss.
Yeah, and again, it's like sort of emo with that kind of like the feel of it. Like you can feel the Bad Astronaut kind of starting to form
definitely
there.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the guitar uses wah. I think that's probably the only guitar effect other than distortion on the entire album. I mean, honestly, because everything else is just so straightforward. And I think there's only like 2 or 3 times where the guitar actually has the distortion turned off. Like, I mean, this album is just unrelenting, kick your ass kind of punk rock. And yeah, Ride the Snake just kind of brings it like, oh yeah, we can do something slightly different here.
Yeah.
You know?
So that was one that if you were a kid, you would have chosen it to be your least favorite. What about now?
I can't do it.
You can't do it?
I don't have a least favorite. I thought that maybe, somewhere in the middle, like Bombs Away or maybe name dropping, because it's kind of like some of the lyrics are a little goofy and, Derek beats up all his girlfriends. I wrote that down because I guess I didn't realize that that's what he said until I was reading along with the lyrics. And I'm like, I didn't do that. Come on, Joey. Yeah, well, Emily had sex with Joey too, so that's kind of weird for me.
Because that's your wife.
That's my wife's name.
For the uninitiated.
So yeah, I just couldn't do it. Like as soon as I started to think that, oh, okay, yeah, I can see this is, it would change and like the bridge would come in and I'd be like, nope, this bridge is so kick-ass, or this instrumental interlude is so good, like it makes the whole song. Like I can't. I don't have a least favorite. Like this is a no skips album. It's a no skips album.
I don't fault you for it at all. I mean, some of my favorite albums of all time, like I recently did Peter Gabriel's Us, which is one of my all-time favorite albums, but I can still acknowledge that there's a song or two on there that, this doesn't work compared to the rest of them.
Yeah. And
on this show, there's only ever been one album, counting Crows, August, and everything after, where I really couldn't choose a worse song or a least good song. And I did write something down for Hoss, but it feels a little bit like I feel like I got to check the box. I don't know that's really the least good song, but
right.
I think that if, it's a pretty long album, and I think that if you took out Bro Dependent, it wouldn't like ruin the album.
It's a lot, and it's becoming oh so clear. I take it in excess, if my true feelings are suppressed, I cannot find the words to say it without hurting.
You know what I mean? It's a good song. It's a really good song, but it's probably the least standout because, like you mentioned, like Bombs Away, Move Your Car, Violins, all these things could have been like punk rock singles. They were just like so electric. Kids Don't Want to Share. All this stuff is like so unique, And then I think Bro Dependent, it's just kind of in the mix a little bit. You know what I mean?
No, totally.
By no means a bad song.
It's a lot more straightforward, right? Yeah. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Very straightforward. But yeah, like Rifle, my favorite song, that doesn't even have a chorus,
It's just the outro.
No, yeah, I mean, it's just full-on rip. There's no chorus. Rifle Me, maybe you could call that part a chorus. Or I don't know. Like, it's so unique. I mean, it's like a progressive punk rock song. It's awesome.
Right, and there's a lot of that going on in this album, which made it hard to pick a best song or a least good song. But yeah, I guess because of the innovation that's happening with so much of the songwriting and the dynamics, I just named like 3 songs. Like I could have said that was my favorite song. But yeah, it's just one of those albums, man. That's why it never gets old. That's why we can listen to it over and over again, because just what they did here is just magic.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's lightning in a bottle, right?
Yeah. Could you pick an underrated?
Well, it got bumped from favorite to underrated, so I'm going to have to go with weak.
Come to know them and what makes them burn. Take out your aggressions and alleviate the hurt. You'll find some
so ripping, and it's always been so ripping. Like, I think that's one of the first songs I sat down to try to figure out how to play myself on guitar, as opposed to telling Morgan to figure it out for me, because he was a hell of a lot better than that.
Right.
Than I was at that. I mean,
almost anyone.
He could just do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even now, like, I can still play that opening riff, you know. I mean, it's so fast.
That is good stuff.
Like, as a guitarist, you're just like, holy shit, like,
those stops are so,
yes.
Like, we loved that in Punk Like Hershey.
Yes.
That was something that,
yes,
that we all
love the stops.
Yes, we would always try and do, like, again, like, heavily consciously emulating this band, this album.
Yep, or what we used to call the Lagwagon chord, where it was just a standard fifth, like, you know, F5, and then you just drop down the root note a half note. We used to call that the Lagwagon chord because they did that all the time on, like, a descending line. And it's totally in this song too. But I mean, it's just so ripping. And again, I think Weak Like Rifle doesn't have a chorus. It's just comes in, it rips, and then it's done, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because, like, again, like, some of the lyrics on this album are just kind of like fun and juvenile in a good way. And then you have Weak, where it's like, you sit down now because I'm not playing with you. It's like, whoa, fuck, holy shit. Like, I'm scared of Joey now.
This little guy is frightening me.
Right? I can just see him. It's a tough song. It is.
Yeah.
So you're attracted to the tougher kind of songs in this album, which doesn't surprise
I think
me.
So.
You kind of tend towards metal and that kind of stuff anyways.
Always have, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, which this album, it's not what I think of as, like, you know, a tough album, but there are some pretty tough moments in it for sure.
Well, like Duh and Trashed, I think, had a whole lot more of that metal edge, you know?
Oh, yeah, with the solo
going on all the time. Yeah, the solos, the riffing. I don't know. I would be interested to know if that was kind of more of, you know, the rest of the band, not necessarily having more say, but having more to say as far as the writing process. But that's what I mean about Hoss. I really think this is like when Joey Cape really said, okay, guys, let's do something. Let's write some good songs, you know, and everyone kind of hopped on board, and they saw how amazing he is at writing songs. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll find our times to shine. But yeah, these songs are amazing. And
so are you saying that, like, for this album, he did the bulk of the songwriting, unlike with Duh and Trash, where there was more collaborative?
I want to say that, you know, this is one of those things that my memory could be wrong, but I feel like at some point I heard that or read that in some way, shape, or form. Anytime I see a podcast with Joey Cape, I'm like, ooh, I want to listen to what Joey has to say about Lagwagon or songwriting or Bad Astronaut or anything that he's done. He's very humble. He says people come up to him at shows and like, you're an amazing songwriter, and, you know, I want to write songs like you do. And he's like, well, here's some real songwriters, you know, that you should go check out. And, you know, I appreciate that, but I don't know. I could be wrong, but I feel like he wrote the bulk of this album. Yeah.
What song do you want to use to go out on?
Oh my God. How about Bombs Away?
Yes. Yeah. Love it. I love Bombs Away so much.
So do I.
It's so fun. That's a great song when they would play it live. You know, it's just like, again, like you say, like talk about like a song like opening up. Like there's so much opportunity in that song to just really swing your fucking arms around and be a drunken bozo.
Those halftime feels, you know, they're danceable for sure.
Yeah, it's a great song. Now you have seen them live, yeah?
Yes, many times.
How many times? I've only seen them, I think, twice.
Oh my God,
maybe 3 times,
5 or 6.
Yeah,
I actually saw him. My wife, Emily, surprised me. It was pre-COVID, so maybe 2019. So in October, on my birthday, on October 2nd, it was like a Wednesday or a Thursday. She took me out for dinner, and then randomly 2 of my good friends showed up for dinner, and I was like, oh, hey guys, cool. What's going on? And they're like, yeah, are you excited to go? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they like kind of like blew the surprise. Oh. And Emily's like, damn it. But yeah, I saw Lagwagon at Face to Face that night, and it was phenomenal. That was probably the last time I saw them, but yeah, I remember seeing him way back in the day with this lineup. I remember us kind of making fun of his dreadlocks because, you know, that wasn't a real thing that we saw in Heartland, Michigan.
White guys with dreadlocks are asking to be made fun of. Let's be honest.
That's true. Yep. So yeah, I remember making those jokes, and I think I have pictures of me when I was 16 at a show.
That's awesome.
With giant Chris Flippin, you know.
Yeah.
And actually, I like snuck my hand like on his man boob.
Yeah, that's ringing a bell.
Actually, a picture of me doing 17-year-old me in a wife beater. That's so
priceless.
Stupid. It's so stupid.
That's funny.
But it makes me laugh every time. I was like, can I get away with this?
Yeah. And they're still very much playing.
Yeah.
They were doing the No Effects final tour thing, and when I saw them in Columbus, unfortunately they weren't on that leg of the tour. I was really hoping I was going to see them with No Effects. But here's a hope. This album came out in 95.
Right.
Maybe next year, maybe I could see them maybe touring in support of it again. That would be very cool.
Oh man,
there's only Chris and Joey left. Maybe they wouldn't.
Yeah.
From this lineup.
Yeah.
So maybe they wouldn't be that keen on it, but maybe that'd be very cool if they did.
Well, I mean, it's a huge album in their discography. It's one of those albums that I think made lifelong fans like you and me.
Yeah.
Because of how amazing it is. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of bands are doing that. Hopefully, big old Flippin's health gets a little better. I guess he's been
struggling.
Having some heart struggles. So,
yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big man. He does not play basketball.
He doesn't?
No, that's in the liner notes here.
I don't remember that. That's funny.
Chris plays guitar when he is not fixing the van. In parentheses, Chris does not play basketball.
Just because he probably gets asked all the fucking time. And he just wanted to put it out there.
No, I'm just really tall.
I can't help my genetics. It doesn't mean I like this sport. Anything else you want to comment about Lagwagon or Hoss?
Yeah, all I can say is that there's just so many great one-lines that Joey wrote on this album that just stick with me, you know, name dropping aside, where, you know, that could work with a lot of your friends and their names. But I mean, silence lies empty. When he goes into that at the end of Sick, I mean, it just gets me every time. I'm like, yes, I don't even know what that means, but it's so good.
I'm ashamed to mention my aim was cut. Silence lies empty. Silence lies empty. Silence lies empty. Silence lies empty. Silence. Silence. Silence lies empty. Silence lies empty. Silence lies empty.
You referenced Ashtray Life. That to me is still one of my favorite lines ever. That, you know, and so you put me out the butt of your sick joke into this Ashtray Life.
Yes.
That whole metaphor is awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, he's a poet.
He is.
I mean, let's see, in Black Eyes as well, I wrote this one down just because it's so great. When one too many beliefs die, it's tough to see through these black eyes. I mean, that's just so poetic.
And he's one of those guys that you sometimes do have to go in and like really pay attention or read the lyric sheet, because he can write these really good and complex lines. Sometimes you're really, really fast with them and you're like, what the fuck did he just say? And then you find out later and you're like, oh shit, that's deep. Maybe, you know, like, why didn't you slow down a little bit there, Joe?
Maybe enunciate just a little bit more. Yeah.
He's a really good lyricist and songwriter. And then the band all works so well together. It really, there's a reason why this album is literally one of the best albums I could think of. It's just something else, man. It really is.
Yeah, man. I'm glad we got to talk about it. It was huge for me, and I knew it was huge for you, and it was huge for all of us at that time. I mean, it's just so great.
Yeah.
Why it's me, I'm bored again. All is well, I'm not insane. I've been drunk for 7 days. Everything is fine. I made some friends, broke the ice. Then I ate some bread and cheese. Eat some wings to keep me warm. Everything's okay.
I always end with like some random kind of question. I don't have anything too formed with you. I just kind of wanted to reminisce about Punk Like Urson with you a little bit.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so I figured you'd be down.
Heck yeah.
Thinking of this album, it puts me right into Steve's basement where we would just hang out, because that's where his drums were, so that's where we had our band practice.
Right.
You know, just fucking lying around talking about it and, like, you know, just discussing it like we are now.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly, yeah.
Not a huge change. I remember our friend Corey, who wasn't in the band, but I remember him like he's not like a Christian person now, but I remember him like being really conflicted by the album and like searching for a new Messiah, and like we would kind of like talk about that some too, like the religious angles of it, which
there's quite a few on this one.
Yeah, and as 16-year-olds roughly, I mean, we had a lot of feelings about this kind of stuff, but not necessarily the sparks for conversation with one another.
Yeah.
And so as much as we would just talk about how this fucking rules, we'd also like have other kind of things stimulated.
Yeah, that's probably why it took me a while to get the album itself. I mean, for one, I was a broke teenager, but for another, that I listened to it with you guys all the time. So maybe one day I just was like, that's enough. I need it for myself.
Yeah, it was pretty much constant, like between, we would jam for a while, then we'd break. And when we were on break, if we weren't smoking weed or cigarettes outside, we were inside and we were probably listening to this album.
Yep. I mean, that's why we had them in the liner notes, right?
Yeah,
you remember that?
We thanked them, right?
Thanks to Lagwagon, in parentheses, not that we know them or anything. It's, I believe exactly.
We literally just thank them for existing.
For just being them. Yeah, for just making music that we enjoyed.
I guess we were trying to acknowledge both that the album was named in reference to them and that, yes, we are aware that
we blatantly ripped off a lot of their riffs. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sound like them, like, the parody version of the light version. Do you remember like any of the shows that we played as Punk Like Carson? Because I really struggled to remember that shit.
I mean, I remember doing like the talent show when
I
had a string break, and then I looked over at Morgan. I'm like, I broke a string. My cheap $150 guitar is out of tune. What do I do? And he's like, I don't know, run around.
So you ran around on stage?
Literally ran around on the stage for the last like minute and a half of the song like an asshole.
That wasn't even our school. That was at Corey Worley's school over in Fenton, right? And I don't even know how we were playing that because none of us went to school there. But we played it. It was some sort of Battle of the Bands thing. And that was
very embarrassing thing for me to do.
Well, you're a kid. And you were on stage with a bunch of strangers. Yeah, that was awkward. I remember playing at our high school at the Battle of the Bands there. And I had been broken up with by my high school girlfriend and had written like, I don't know, 2 or 3 songs about her were like in there. And there was something in the back of my mind with like, maybe she'll hear them. Maybe she'll see how I feel, and she actually like did come to the Battle of the Bands and like heard the songs. And like we were back together very shortly after that. I was like, yes, it worked.
Yeah. That's great. I don't remember that. That's awesome.
But I don't remember playing any real shows. I think we played like Token Lounge in Livonia.
We did a couple. Like. We definitely did a couple. We definitely did the Token Lounge for sure.
Everyone did the Token. And I'm sure we did Flint Local 432.
Did we ever go to Pharaoh's Golden Cup I know we did it as Kill Drama maybe, but I feel like we did too. And
probably
there were some sketchy shows that 16 and 17-year-olds probably shouldn't have been going to in Detroit to play. But like, I know that when we did that album with whatever that dude's name was, Scott something, right?
Scott.
I don't know anything. I really don't know anything. Something.
Tabuda Records. Scott Tabuda Records.
Yeah.
God bless him. He saw something in us.
And he helped us get shows. And I remember some of those shows. I think one in particular was a Battle of the Bands in Detroit. You remember Hoppin' Mad?
Yes.
That's when we saw Hoppin' Mad and we played with them.
Good.
Yeah, they were awesome. And we kind of like, I remember Steve like was kind of big in front of the drummer though. Like he was just doing, the normal punk rock beat on the hi-hat, but then when he went over to the ride, it was up here and he would kind of like bounce up and down when he hit it. I don't know why things like that like stick in my mind. Honestly, I don't even remember getting on the stage and playing because I was probably so mortified and in shock.
Well, that's the thing with memory, right? Like I remember being upstairs at some bar with Hoppin' Mad playing pool with them after we either after we all played or like between or something.
They were older and they kind of like took us under their wing that night because we were both punk bands. And
and I don't remember playing the show at all. No memory of the show itself. We must.
It was one of those stupid shows where you had to like sell tickets ahead of time.
I always hated
kind
that
of thing. Remember that?
Yeah, that was always the worst. You got to like sell. Yeah, like we'll let you play a show, but now you got to sell tickets. And it's like, well, and that's what real bands do. But we didn't like that. We're not a real band.
No. We were teenagers that had to probably drive 3 different vehicles just to get our shit there.
Right. Literally.
Yeah.
I'm sure we played Flint Local 432 more than once or twice. I think I even have a flyer or 2 still left of that.
We absolutely did. There's pictures flying around. Actually, I think my wife Emily upstairs has a bunch from then. There's like pictures of us sweating up on that little tiny stage in that long skinny corridor that was a music venue. Yeah, there's definitely some pretty good pictures out there. I think some actually went into the school's newspaper.
Oh, really?
That's funny. Because Emily was on the newspaper.
we thought we were big shit for a little while because this was all happening when we were like juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
And we got like on some local compilation, and we kind of thought we were going somewhere. And who knows? Maybe we could have. I don't know. But we always had a shitty name. I mean, that name sucked.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It was a terrible name for many reasons.
Well, I feel like we named everything after, just being dickheads. I think all those band names back then was,
Well, yeah, and also it's just this clumsy band name, so it's like it didn't work. And then towards the end of things with Punk Like Ursa, after we graduated high school, I remember it getting to the point where like we were not a punk band really anymore. We were like listening to Voice That's Fire and stuff like that, and just kind of evolving. And it really didn't make sense to call ourselves Punk Like Ursa anymore, so we broke up.
Yeah,
for
other reasons, but I mean, that was
no, for many reasons, I guess.
Yeah, that was a good time though. I look back on those times very fondly, and I actually still have like 2 full cases of CDs.
I have 1 or 2 myself still.
I think I sent you a picture recently that they're holding up the monitors on my my home office desk.
At least they're serving a function. They're just collecting dust in my basement.
Well, I mean, that recording in general is, it's, there's tracks that I can't listen to because of how fucking poorly I played guitar on them. Like, I look back on it and I'm like, oh my God, was I terrible.
It was a
rush I was definitely the weak link in musical talent in that band. I mean, playing alongside Morgan, that dude is still to this day just a shredder. He's like a human metronome too.
Yeah. I always really liked coming back from shows because it was always late at night and we'd stop by Denny's or like Ramshorn or someplace like that. It'd just be like our whole crew, maybe some of our friends and girlfriends, and that kind of stuff, and just take over a corner booth somewhere. And that was one of the other things I really loved about that time, is that it wasn't just us, it was like this thing that connected us to all of our friends, and and gave us these multiple opportunities to be together and just bond and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was a great time in our lives.
Certainly was. Yeah, some people look back on high school and they're like, I hated high school. I'm like, really? I fucking love my high school experience.
We went to Punk Rock High. That's what other people literally called it. So other schools. And,
the Hossy, quote unquote, that
our friends group.
Some people called us, but just all of us, like we were all into the same things. We hung out and we loved each other. Still do.
It's pretty golden. Yeah, it still is. You're right.
Yep.
And that's a good note to end on. Thanks for coming back on, Derek. I love you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This was awesome. Love you too, Trav.
Sometimes editing these episodes goes really well and quickly. Sometimes it goes really, really slow. I don't know if you can tell right now, but my nose is basically gone. It's like sealed over. I don't have one anymore. I'm in the middle of the worst allergy season of my entire life, and I'm able to finish editing this album today because I'm home from work with pink eye. Fucking pink eye. I can't believe I'm admitting that to you, but I don't even know how I got it. I just woke up with it. I haven't had it since I was a kid. I don't know. I work with teenagers. Who knows? I'm not thrilled. Oh, God, I can barely talk. So I'm going to make this short, except for the fact that we lost a legend yesterday in my time. Yesterday, Steve Albini died. A fucking giant in the industry. Steve Albini was, he was a legend, and he was a producer, but apparently he didn't like being called a producer. He preferred engineer. And he engineered a lot of really big albums. He's probably best known for engineering In Utero by Nirvana, Rid of Me by PJ Harvey, No Pocky for Kitty by Superchunk, Goat by the Jesus Lizard, Pod by the Breeders, Tweez by Slint, and Surfer Rosa by Pixies. And he was more than just an engineer. He was also a loudmouth iconoclast, and apparently a hell of a poker player, and a community activist, and a musician himself. This is the song My Black Ass that starts off the 1994 album At Action Park by the band Shellac. I'd love to have someone come on the show and talk about this release from 1994. How awesome would it be to spend some time talking about this super underrated album that is so fucking hard-hitting? And of course, the man himself, Steve Albini, who has come up on this podcast so many times already because he was integral to the era. He was only 61. He had a lot left to give us, but he did at least give us so much before he left. So it'd be great to talk about it with somebody, but of course, I'm always looking for guests to talk about any album from 1993 or 1994. All you gotta do is email me at 9394podcast@gmail.com and we'll talk. When I'm not sick as a dog or whatever the fuck is going on with my body right now. I bit my tongue really bad yesterday too when I was sneezing. I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna say thank you to Steve Albini. I'm gonna say thank you to Derek Fern. Thank you to Lagwagon, not that we know them or anything. And of course, thank you to you for listening. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. '93-'94, a music podcast with Travis Roy, is a labor of love. It is not and never will be monetized. Please don't sue.